knife chip and shatter.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. We're here to talk Dune Part 2. We've both gone and seen. I'm here with Hayden. We've both gone and seen the movie. And we're just going to talk impressions and kind of what we thought. There's a lot to dig into here.
There is.
First of all, because the movie's almost 3 hours long.
Yep.
And second, there's just a lot happening in it and mostly good. So,
Yeah.
Hayden, let's go to you first. Like, just overall thoughts on the movie. What was your first reaction walking out?
I was so excited for this movie, like genuinely, and I felt like those expectations were met, if not surpassed. Like, because we knew this was going to be much more epic, so to speak, than the first one, right? Just because of the source material of the book that we're covering in this one. There's just more going on and more that, more action, more things that are potentially visually interesting. So I had no doubt that that would hit for me. But the characters resonated for me so much harder in this movie than I thought they would. Like, the people and what they're going through and what they're suffering, what they're trying to overcome, and, the plot that kind of strings all that together, the story worked for me way more than I expected it to. And this is this is one of those movies that I got out of the theater and I was instantly, like, looking around me to see if there was an IMAX that was showing it, like, seeing if I could do the 70 millimeter anywhere, like... My first reaction was like, I need to see this movie again because it's so dense. There's so much to unpack that it would help to just process it. But also there's so many moments that were incredible and that I want to experience again on the biggest screen I can reasonably get to. So that's where I'm at.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, when I walked out, I first was like, it was like happiness and relief almost, because when this was first announced that this was going to be a 2-part thing, years ago, my first reaction was just like, I guess stories like this, science fiction stories in particular that are, based off a book or et cetera, don't necessarily get justice done to them or for them,
Very true.
In these types of things. Like, just look at the 1984 version. It is not.
It's rough.
What I'd call. Yeah. I mean, it's okay, but it's not ideal.
No, for sure.
And there are tweaks to the story that we're going to talk about here and that are different from the book. But ultimately, I walked out thinking, the spirit of the story from Herbert was there. And I feel like it was spot on and adjusted for 2024.
Yeah.
In ways that probably needed to happen. So I think, all in all, I think incredible. But you're right. See this in a theater. Everybody don't wait for digital or whatnot.
This is one of those rare movies that I think is genuinely worth seeing in a theater to fully immerse yourself in, to have the bigger screen. And I think it does such a good job of transporting you to a world and being immersive that the less you can do to distract you from that, the better, for sure.
Yep. There's a spectacle to it too. Like, just
Absolutely.
Some of the action set pieces, etc. Much better on the big screen with the sound there as well. We'll talk sound in a little bit, but let's dig into plot. So essentially, you were getting the second half of the first Dune novel, and when we leave off, Paul is basically meeting the Fremen for, the group for the first time.
Right.
We're picking up here with him sort of incorporating himself into the Fremen. The first half of this movie is largely Paul adopting a lot of, the Fremen's ways, et cetera, and rising to a leadership position within them. And then the second half, we see the battle for, basically his family's legacy and battle for revenge and all those things against the Harkonnen, et cetera.
Yeah.
So plot-wise, definitely moves faster than the first one, no doubt about that.
Oh, way, yeah. It's because it's longer than the first one, but it feels shorter. It's a very dense, 2 hours and 45 minutes. And I was trying to, in the theater, guesstimate where we were at, and I genuinely, I have no idea.
I'll be honest, when I'm in a long movie like this, I will oftentimes, I'll repeatedly take the phone very in a sly way, look at it. So I'm not lighting up the theater, Yeah, just to look at the time. Not to look at text message or anything, but look at the time. I did it once this time, and I was like, okay, we're probably halfway through. And then that last act of the movie, the third act, is really good and just action and intensity, et cetera, et cetera.
For sure.
So I didn't, I was actually like, okay, I guess we're done, when you get to the end.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, plot-wise, though, like, what did you think? Did you feel like, from a story perspective, this movie delivered?
We're going full spoilers, right? Gloves are off?
Yeah, so full spoilers, everybody. Yeah, if you haven't seen it yet, go see it. Come back and watch after.
Okay. Yeah, I think the plot definitely worked, and I think there are so many moments in this movie that, like, build to a complete tonal shift, right? Because there's a lot of comparisons have been made going into Dune to Star Wars, right? Be it the films themselves or just the fervor around it of people saying like this could be Star Wars for Gen Z, right? And I felt like to make a Star Wars comparison, I think the most apt one tonally is Revenge of the Sith, where it's like the first half of the movie, I'm so on board with Paul. Like, I'm right with him. I'm rooting for him. I support him. I'm a believer. I'm excited for, like, him to rise and have his, like, quote unquote rebirth, right? After he takes the water of life. And then as soon as he wakes up and you see the blue eyes, there's like a different demeanor on his face. And I'm like,
yep.
Oh shit, like, put it back in. Like, I don't think you were ready for this. And I don't, and obviously we see the consequences of that after, but there's so many layers to that too, where it's like, it gets to the point where, like, when that final battle happens, like, where it's the Emperor, who's played by Christopher Walkin, and then he has Austin Butler's Fade Rotha go up against Timothy Chalamet's Paul Atreides. They're kind of, all three of them are battling for, like, someone is going to get control over the known universe in the end of this knife fight. I'm like, I don't want any of you here. Like, can we bring in, like, a fourth option? Like, this is a no-win scenario. And I think that's what's so interesting about this movie, is that it makes you believe in and root for Paul. And then, in the third act, which is a pretty long third act, right? So, like, what we'd consider the third act, I would say, is almost like half the movie. But by the time you get there, you're just like you're loving what you're seeing, but you want it to stop, right? For these characters that you have grown to care about. And I think we'll get to characterization later, obviously, but I think that was done way better here too. Because they just had more to do.
Yes. When you get into themes here, I think, you're talking a lot about things like religion and power and et cetera, et cetera. And I think one of the themes that gets repeated throughout the film is, this religion, this blind faith is a way to keep you oppressed, because it is, keeping you from kind of opening your eyes, and you're just constantly waiting for this thing to come save you.
Yep.
And instead of, acting in being an agent for your own freedom, liberty, etc.
Exactly.
Zendaya's character is the one, Chani is the one in the movie, which is a difference from the book. We'll get to it, is one who really is that set of eyes, sees it from that perspective.
Yes, for sure. She's aware of what's going on, right? It's interesting. I think there's a divide almost with, like, the younger and older Fremen, where you see, like, there's that scene where they're eating, and it's like, on the one side is all the older people who look at Paul like the Messiah, and then on the other side are all of, like, the younger people in their 20s and 30s who are kind of, like, honestly shit talking him.
Yep.
And it's like high school bullying almost. Yeah, it's very cliquey.
It's at least shit talking the idea of him being the Messiah, right? And so,
which he doesn't believe in himself fully either.
No,
not at that point.
I'm still not sure he does at the end, but he knows he can use it.
Right.
So it's an interesting dynamic, and I found that to be one of the more interesting things in the movie, which also, when you introduce those themes, especially with some of the choices made that differ from the book, it becomes a little controversial, right? So
yes.
We'll talk about that when we get to the differences from the book. So characters, who's your favorite character in the movie?
Ooh, I've had a feeling going in it was going to be Fade Rotha, and I was proven right, because, like,
oh yeah,
I anticipated that villain really hard. I was excited for it, because I think the villains were one of the things that was missing from Dune Part 1 for me, where I really enjoyed the Baron, and I really enjoyed his nephew, who's played by Dave Bautista, when he gets his hands dirty. Is that the right actor? It is Dave Bautista, right?
Yeah, it's Dave Bautista.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So I really enjoyed the two of them, but I don't think like, I think those two villains played, each of them was part of a villain, you know what I mean? Whereas Fade Roth, I think you get both, where you get like the leadership, but also the brutality. And the way that they chose to introduce him, which obviously the same as it is in the book, but the fact that it's like he's getting to essentially kill slaves in a gladiatorial arena as his like big birthday bash is it's absurd, but it's brutal. And the way it's shot, and like just his whole intro of just like his voice, the way he looks, that scene where he like is hanging out with like his staffers and like seemingly maybe like his concubines, and he takes out two of them with the knives and is just like, you gotta sharpen the tip on this, bud.
Yeah, that's how he tests out the knife, you know. And just like go ahead.
It's a character that so easily could have fallen flat, right? Because it's almost goofy, because it's so out there, like it's so evil, it's so menacing that it could not work. But I think just like Austin Butler just leaned into it so well and took it seriously, and they made him so epic just based on the way they shot things and framed him and lit him in that gladiator scene, especially, that it connected for me. It worked.
I think, for me, it's the same. I did enjoy Walkin's performance as the Emperor as well, but it didn't take up much of the movie, though, right? It was pretty. He was only in a handful of scenes.
Yeah,
but Fade Roth is it's an amazing performance. I much prefer this portrayal to the one in the '84 version. By Sting. So, it's just a better way of portraying the character, at least for my taste. I'm sure there's people watching this that would prefer the other, but
like the campiness of the old one.
Yeah, I think though, I don't think this story is campy though, and
not at all.
When you try to make it campy, like there's some really serious themes being talked about in that book, and you know, and I think this one at least does, you know, justice to them, shows them the respect they deserve.
Absolutely.
Whether you agree how they're portrayed or not is totally fair game to talk about, but they're at least shown that respect. And you know, Austin Butler, not just Elvis anymore. That is this is a really good performance, and I think we'll probably get some love come Oscar season. So
absolutely, it feels very informed by like Heath Ledger's Joker in The Dark Knight, right?
Yes.
Where I feel like that performance kind of changed how people go about villains. And you can see that there, even down to like some of the mannerisms and the voice thing he does. But it also really much, I was listening to another podcast that's a podcast all about Dune, and they were doing their spoiler cast of this, and they said that like his voice sounds like the Baron's but younger. And like now that I think about it, it totally does. And it's interesting that he was able to capture that, where it's like you believe that there's a direct line you can draw, I think, between the two of them, of their familial connection. What did you think of did any of the returning characters that didn't work for you before, do they now work, or did anyone stick out to you more than they did in the first one? Because I feel like there's a lot of roles that got to shine way more in this film than they did in part one.
Oh, yeah. I mean, totally. Most of the characters in the Fremen, right, really shined in this. And Stilgar, right, Javier Bardem is fantastic in this, and
heart and soul of this movie, honestly. And it's weird because you wouldn't get that from the first one, that he'd end up being comedic relief in ways, but also it's like, I don't know, he's got this gentle giant quality to him, but he's also like incredibly serious and like devoted in his faith to the point of like, it's violent. Like he's a zealot by the end, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's, you know, so on one hand you like give credit to this character who's very driven by faith, right, and has this constant North Star that doesn't get wavered from, but on the other side it's like, man, you are to the point where it's just pure blindness, right? So no matter what Paul does, and you see there's a point in the movie where it's basically the line, it's like, see, that's just proof that it's true, right? And you're taking whatever to make it evidence that your thing is true,
right?
But yeah, I love that character. And what do you think of Paul's mother in this?
Ooh, I think she would get like my most improved award. You know what I mean? Because I
Same.
feel like in the first movie, she was kind of just there and was almost like, I don't want to say damsel in distress to be demeaning, but I feel like that was kind of the role. Like she was grieving mother. You know what I mean? It was kind of very one note. And I don't think that's down to her performance. I think that's just down to the plot of that first movie and the first half of the book, right? And what she has to do is essentially grieve. But in this one, to see her go from being afraid of the Reverend Mother in the first one to being a Reverend Mother now, and honestly being like way more terrifying than hers was. Like, I think like there were times in this movie where like I was genuinely frightened by her performance and just the way that, especially when she got the tattoos on her and the blue eyes, just like the way she was lurking, the way she was talking, and the kind of things she was saying of, I'm going to paraphrase, can't remember the line exactly, and obviously we can't reference it because the movie's not out yet, but she was talking about like converting people and what an opportunity that is for them. And she's like, we're going to convert everybody one by one, start with the weak ones, start with the people who fear us. And it's just such like a evil, callous way to go about this. And her dynamic with Paul is so good too.
It is. She to me is, you know, we talked about parallels with Star Wars before. She to me is the Palpatine of this. Like she's pulling the strings behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And setting up a lot of the, you know, everything that's happening.
Right.
She's creating the narrative within the Fremen of what Paul is, right?
Yep.
And, you know, I thought it was just a great turn for that character. And the actress too, and I forget her name off the top of my head, and I apologize.
Rebecca Ferguson, I believe.
There you go. Okay, thank you. And, you know, she's in the Mission Impossible movies too. The later ones, and is great in those. It's just it's strange seeing her take on a role like this because it's a big departure from that.
Yeah,
but outstanding. Yeah, I mean, so many characters. Which other one stood out for you?
So I think we talked about Christopher Walken, and I loved his performance. It was so weird seeing him here, but it was also like, it's a lot of times when you see actors that are big names in movies, it's really, especially something that's so different from our own world, it's really tough to separate that actor from, or that character from the actor, right? Where you see Christopher Walken instead of seeing the Emperor. But I think, honestly, that kind of worked in their favor with this, because you hear about the Emperor, but he doesn't really mean anything to us yet until we actually see him, right? But Christopher Walken as a personality does. And I think the scene where it works so well, where the scene where Paul Atreides like takes over power, like it connects with us, where it's like we don't understand who the Emperor is to Paul, but we understand who Christopher Walken is to Timothée Chalamet in our own world. And to see like such a seasoned veteran actor kneeling in front of essentially this boy, right, at this point, it was so jarring. And I think it worked so well, and it helped you understand what a big moment this is in the context of their world. And I think this is going to be a career-defining performance for Timothée Chalamet too. Like, obviously,
totally.
he pulled things I didn't know he had in there. You know what I mean?
I told you, like, off content that, you know, I had a hard time buying him in the lead role of this movie when it was first announced, and proved me wrong in every single way. Like, was outstanding here, but it's a different type of role than he has taken. In the past. So, like, yeah, I agree. It's going to be career defining. Already on board, I guess, for Messiah, like in 27. So we're not done with Dune, but yeah, this was great.
I need more of this. I don't know if I need the whole book series adapted, but I definitely want to see that story, especially to see this actor pull those notes, because he was so angry and so menacing in this movie in ways that I just like I didn't know he could do, and it was jarring. It was terrifying.
Let's talk style. There are two things that really stood out to me from a style perspective in this movie, and so I'll go first, and then I'll defer afterward to the film major of us. But Fade Routher's introduction, the choice to go black and white there, I thought was really smart.
For sure.
I think it just created a different environment around that scene. It told you what you're seeing is different and important. And then going back to color, like when he's interacting with the Baron, right?
Yeah, and the Bene Gesserit
Yep.
as well.
So just a really interesting choice there. And then that final knife fight, like, I thought, we'll get to the score. I thought the score was outstanding, but it was a brilliant choice to not have it in that scene. It just added to the intensity and the ferocity, the brutality of that fight.
Yes.
And
but it kind of added... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I just thought those were two outstanding choices in a movie full of outstanding choices cinematically.
Oh, yeah. For sure.
So, yeah, what did you think?
So, it's the thing that's really cool to me about the black and white stuff in that Coliseum is that it's actually motivated by the world, too, right? Because they talk about how they have this black sun, and that's why they're all pale all the time, and that's is what their world looks like. And they shot it in infrared, apparently.
Really? Okay.
So it was like a heat map almost, which is why it has that stark visual where it doesn't look like no movie black and white. It looks very almost ghostly. It's creepy. It's very creepy. It works so well. And I think like there are so many stylistic things down to this where it's like just incredible filmmaking practices all around, right? Gorgeously shot movie, incredibly scored movie. And, like, there's just, like, so many moments, like, in the fight choreography and stuff where things are just so visceral in a way that, like, I forgot this movie was PG-13 until the end when it shows that in the very end of the credits. It should have been R.
Do you think it should have been R? Like, or would you prefer an R version of this?
I would be interested to see what it is, but honestly, like, the only time, like, I don't know, there's maybe 2 or 3 scenes that would have like a little more blood. You know what I mean? I don't think anything was missing by it not being R. I think you still got how visceral the action and intensity was, right? And I also think just unfortunately down to the way the studio system works, I think if this movie was rated R, I don't think it gets as much money as it did. And you need a budget of this scale to tell this story the way it deserves to be told. You know what I mean?
I'm glad you brought it up because I think it's another brilliant style thing in this film and something that the filmmakers deserve a lot of credit for. This movie's PG-13, but it feels violent.
It does.
And it's dark and it's violent and it feels like a rated R movie. It really does.
And I think it's because the violence is personal. And especially in the latter half of the movie, it is happening to people that you really care about. You know what I mean? So because obviously in the beginning, you kind of see more like, you know, quote unquote grunt red shirt death, like when Paul is taking out the Harkonnen soldiers who give probably one of, if not the coolest image in the film right in the beginning when the Fremen start calling the sandworm and they're like, we gotta climb. And the way that they float up, it's not a jetpack. It's almost like they're just like letting some air out of a balloon. Where there's just like a real weightlessness to it, which I think is like such an interesting aesthetic. And I think like everything aesthetic of this movie down to like the costumes, the sets, like it all feels so real, right? It feels futuristic, it feels distant, it feels sci-fi, but it feels like it doesn't feel like a reality that's parallel to ours. It feels like one that our world could one day become.
That's the thing. So when I look at costumes,
so cool.
And I compare costumes to like the 84 version, right? Because it's the same story. And the Atreides, you know, thing is it's like a World War I era military uniform almost.
Yes.
Like it's
for sure.
And
very green.
Yeah. And well, it's like black, red, gold, like the thing and whatever it's called, I forget, over the shoulder. But it's like, I don't know, this felt real for the environment they're in, the types of characters these are. You know, it did. And just a great choices all around, style wise, including the score. We don't need to say Hans Zimmer is a great, you know, composer by any means.
Everyone knows at this point, very established.
But it's outstanding. Like it just adds to the movie in every way.
For sure.
So I know you had a couple things to talk about, just differences from the book that you wanted to call out. So what do you got?
Okay, so the big one is the way that they treat Alia, the daughter. And so in the book and all previous iterations so far that have been all adaptations of the story, we do a bit of a time skip, right? So she's born and she's like a toddler, maybe like 6, 8 tops, right? But in this story, it's like she's like we cut to the inside of her mother's stomach and we see an embryo. And like it's very Death Stranding to me. It's delightfully weird. And they kind of get like, she talks to everybody almost through a game of telephone with her mother, right? Where like she'll be like, my daughter told me to tell you this. And sometimes it's like genuinely really cold. Like there's the one scene where like they're talking about what the Paul Atreides and his mother are talking about like what they're really here to do, right?
Yes.
And the daughter is like, you're blinded by love. But she tells it to the mom, so it's like, your sister told me to tell you you're blinded by love. And it's like, oh my God. And then you see that moment where it's like when Paul gets activated and you see the flash forward where he imagines a future where he sees her and she's standing on the shores of the beaches of Arrakis. And you're just like, oh my God. That was such a hype moment for me. The character, so that's I think by far the biggest difference, and that kind of leads to some other ones as well, where obviously she's not around to kill the Baron. It's Paul that does it. And I think Paul doing it is such a great moment for his character, because that is like genuinely the coldest. Like he kills him in cold blood, straight up. Like it's not a fight. He goes down and like he puts him down like a wounded animal. And he even says like he puts the knife in his neck and says, you die like an animal. I think for that I think his only lines are he goes like grandfather, gives him a bit of a nod.
Yep.
Puts the knife in and says, you die like an animal. And it's incredible to see because like the Baron is such a creepy and gross figure. And to see him just go out like a sick animal to the person who's supposed to be our hero was such a great choice. And then the way they treated Chani is so different. And I think it works with adaptation, right?
It's causing a lot of controversy amongst some fans.
And because it puts us in a place where like where our Dune threequel is going to go is a little more up in the air than I would have thought when I walked into this movie, right? Because in the books, he has the marriage to the Emperor's daughter, and then Princess Arula, I think. And then there's kind of that love triangle, right, where he's married to her in name only, but he still has a relationship with Chani, and they still foster that, right? And there's even like the book ends with the Mother Reverend, kind of comforting her and telling her like, we'll get to have our moment in history, because while people may see us as mere concubines right now, history will remember us as wives. And it's such a powerful thing to tell her that, like, I went through this, like, he does love you, I promise. He just cannot appear to the world because of all of the politicking that has to happen in this world, right? But when it happens in the movie, it feels like a legitimate betrayal.
Oh, it's
and the
cold.
way it's messed up, and the way it's performed is like she's shocked to the point of where like she leaves the Fremen completely, seemingly, because we end right on the cliffhanger of her calling the worm and getting the ice pick type things to get ready to ride it, and we don't know where she's going, but we just know that she is no longer following the Fremen because the Fremen are following him.
Yep.
So
obviously this is creating some stuff. I mean, I've seen a lot of, reviews, etc., saying that this choice is just to make it woke, etc. I don't buy that. I think it's...
I don't either.
This is a book angle? That was
what are they saying is making it woke?
Because it's got to be like female empowerment and rejecting him and all of this stuff and, all that. So, first of all, this book was written 60 years ago, give or take.
Yeah.
Right? So, the views back then of, politics and how, dominant cultures, etc., and all that, totally different, right, than they are now.
Yes.
And you've got to make a movie for today's audience. You do. And I think it's one of the things that they did really well in this book, because it is a story for today that keeps the spirit of Dune throughout.
Yes.
And I don't know. I read one comment, I'm not kidding, where it's like, you have to go and make this super woke, but then the next sentence they're like, I did like the anti-abortion angle though, and I didn't get that. I don't know where you found that, but
in the embryo,
yeah,
the talking embryo, because they treat it as a person.
Okay,
is maybe where they were pulling from, but I don't.
but that's because it can speak to her, right? As a result of the, drinking the blue stuff. So it's there's a caveat there that we're leaving out of the comment, but anyway,
yes, for sure.
But yeah, I mean, what made me just like jaw drop at that moment was like, you don't like when it has something to say unless you like what it has to say. Then it's okay. Like literally exactly. One sentence to the next.
Yeah,
it's bitching, and then I'm like, I like that it made this stand out. Oh, come on.
Yeah, it's cherry picking, it's window shopping. You know what I mean? Which is, I think I don't agree with those person's opinions, but I think you are allowed to like certain things of a film and not like others, right? And they're going to resonate differently for different people. I think the biggest way I've heard that happen is the way that the Fremen are represented, right? Because the Fremen, I think when you read the book, very obviously are inspired by people who live in the Middle East. They're inspired by like ancient Muslim and Islamic culture in general, right? And the movies adaptations we've gotten, the movies and the TV shows have always showed the Fremen as white people. And this movie, I feel like doubled down is like, not only did it cast them as mostly the people that should be represented, right? The people that whose cultures we're being inspired from. They, like, even the way that they pray is like very traditional Islam, where they pull down the carpet, the gestures, the movements, the way they lean and rock is all very inspired by that in a way that I thought was tasteful. And I don't want to speak for, obviously that's not representing me on screen.
Right.
But I have heard people who did feel genuinely represented by that screen in a big way. People who are Middle Eastern, who are, practicing members of the Muslim faith, who feel like they saw themselves on screen in a big way. And I think that really matters and is definitely something to be celebrated for sure.
Yeah, totally agree. And
it feels authentic, like, to the world. Like, it makes more sense, I feel like, for the world that, this culture that's supposed to be secluded and ancient, we show them doing things that in our world we recognize as being ancient practices. You know what I mean?
Yep, for sure.
Or traditional, at the very least.
Yeah, and all I would say is your hopes are right. Like, you can like things in a movie, you can not like things in a movie, and that's cool. Like, that's the beauty of, interpreting art. But I would caution, if you're getting those likes and not like opinions from your thoughts on, like, whatever cable news you watch or anything like that, like, maybe take a step back and say, am I really looking at this for what it is?
Do you think those outlets are even going to cover Dune, though? Like, there's no way you're getting Tucker Carlson to sit through a 3-hour-long art house blockbuster.
I think if there's outrage money to be made from it, then yes, totally.
Fair enough.
And that's really all it's about, right?
Fair enough.
So let's give this thing a score and get the hell out of here. So, what do you think? Where are you with Dune Part 2?
Look, people are gonna start thinking I'm a sellout, given this score back to back on 2 different episodes of content. But like, I feel like it would be disingenuous for me to not give Dune a 10, because I love this movie. I can't stop thinking about it. It's made me want to immerse myself in this world even further. I've already started looking for, action figures and the books and stuff.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah,
I was encouraged when you talked about the books. Like, I'm like, let's go.
But but that's, the franchise aside, like, talking about the film itself, I just think such a moment, like, such an incredible moment that, like, it's so. There have been films in my life that I have thought were like artistic masterpieces that really understood and explored what it means to be a filmmaker. There have also been really big blockbusters in my life that I have absolutely loved. I've never seen a movie do both so right in such a big way. And I feel like this is like an instant classic for me. Like, it's one of those movies that is a moment that, like, I feel like I'm going to tell my kids and grandkids about. And we talked on the podcast about, like, the lost episode, unfortunately, that we lost the tech issues. But we did do a segment where we talked about movie moments that, like, we're so glad that we saw in theaters, like movies we were glad to be a part of, right? And I think for me, this is one of those where I feel like this is defining, and it's the whole movie. I was engrossed, engaged, immersed, and just like genuinely grateful to be alive at the same time as Dune Part 2.
Yeah, I don't think a movie has to be perfect to be a 10.
I don't either. I don't honestly think this movie was perfect. You know what I mean?
It wasn't. No, very, very, very few are, right? So,
if any, yeah.
Right. I would say this, like, I walked out of this thinking that there's basically only 2 series ever that took a beloved book trilogy or book series, right? And did it justice from a, like, capturing the spirit of it and all of that. First was Lord of the Rings with Peter Jackson. And second is this. Are there differences from the books? Yes, but there are differences from Lord of the Rings and the movies and books too, right? And those films are beloved by the community, and I think this one can be too. I feel like this tackled the darkness and violence and, like, just all of that Dune represents, but did it in a way that makes you want to cheer for these characters up till the end.
Yeah,
you know,
up till the exact moment they make the wrong call.
Yep,
I'm with
like
them.
You're pulling for Paul up till the end, right? And it's So, great performances across the board by a really good cast, and you know, again, parallel to Lord of the Rings, there, right? Great performances by a great cast, and it's a 10 for me. Like, it's not perfect, but it is the type of movie.
Double 10.
Yeah, it is the type of movie that you just sit there afterwards thinking about it, and for me, that says a lot. So,
do you think you're going to see it again in theaters? Do you have the desire to go out?
Because if I had IMAX close to me, I would, but I don't. So, maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah,
we'll see. I'm
debating.
We'll see.
I'm definitely going to go again because I want to see it in IMAX, because I went to kind of like a smaller local art house theater for my first viewing. So I want to have the massive, huge screen experience. Yeah. But there are 12 theaters in the world that are showing this movie in, like, the IMAX 70 millimeter, like the exact perfect frame rate it was shot for, on, like, the giant, like, 3-mile roll of film. It's about one of them is about a 2-hour drive from me, and I'm really heavily considering it.
Is that Toronto?
It's a little north of Toronto, but yes, about that area.
Yeah.
Wow, way to dox me, Tyler. No, I'm kidding.
I mean, if you have a compass now, you can create a big circle of area where you might be. So, okay. Cool. All right, well, hey, it's a 10 out of 10. We're good. We love it. Go see it. Let us know what you think of the movie in the comments. Sure. So if you hate it because it's like woke or something, we can't fix that for you. So sorry. No. But watch it for what it is, and you know, it's fun. It's a good time. So it's what movies should be in the theater. It's a spectacle. It's a big time action movie, sci-fi, all that stuff. So okay, we're gonna get out of here. We kind of stayed on track today, better than we did the other day.
Yeah.
But anyway,
we went over our target by what, like 10-20%?
10 minutes.
That's good for us.
That is really good for us. It is progress, which we're all about here. So, all right. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, all that good stuff. It really helps us out a ton, and we appreciate it. Plus, if you subscribe to the channel, you get more coverage on Dune and Walking Dead and all sorts of other entertainment stuff, video games, etc., etc. So do all that. Look for us with more content coming soon. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Take care, y'all.